Well, welcome everyone. Good afternoon or very early good morning to you. Special shout out to all of the African Plant Breeder Association students who are joining us today. We really appreciate your guys' attendance. So thanks for taking the time to join us. My name's Brittany Jones. I am a soybean breeder for Bayer Crop Science and also your guys' current acting vice chair for the Graduate Student Working Group. So I'm pretty excited to present today's topic, which is developing a professional brand. We're going to be hearing from two speakers today. The first will be Julie Dawson from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and Elzandi Usthuzian from Bayer Crop Science. So today's event is in a series that we're putting together for 2021, all having to do with professional development. So you can look out for another webinar or panel coming this March, April, and May. So some of our topics are listed on the slide here. So definitely be on the lookout for announcements in regards to these. And we'll be sending out information soon. So you can get pretty excited about that. Also, before we jump right in today's meeting, I did want to take just a few seconds or minutes to cover some announcements. So for the 2021 NAPB Borlaug Scholar, applications are open. The deadline to submit a nomination is this March 18th. So I would encourage you to take time if you're interested to look at this application, start preparing your materials. It's not a short application, and February happens to be a very short month too. Little shocked that it's almost over already. So in 2020, there were 16 graduate and 2 undergrad students that were given this opportunity to become 2020 Borlaug Scholars. Mentors were from both private and public sectors as well. So if you want more information, you can follow this link. Zara is also being awesome and posting different links in the chat as well to help you guys follow up on those. I just want to put out there that if you are interested or you have questions or you want to hear about experience with the Borlaug Scholars, I would encourage you to reach out to the 2020 Scholars, which that includes myself and Zara. So we're happy to help share any experience. And actually, Julie today is one of the mentors for the Borlaug Scholars. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to those and we'd be happy to give information or share some of our experience. If you're not already a part of the graduate student community, I would encourage you to join either, and you have many options. We're on all the platforms. So that includes Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and now LinkedIn. Ren and Souza, our social media coordinator, does a fabulous job of posting on time and interesting announcements. This could be announcements for webinars, workshops, or even job internships. So be on the lookout for those. It's usually the fastest way to get any new information from us. Or if you're interested and want to share some of your own exciting events, just let us know. I also think it's worth mentioning that the NAPB has a YouTube channel. So even after today's webinar, this webinar will be posted up there. And it actually is a great archive of many videos, I think almost going back 4 or 5 years at this point, where it covers skills from the technical side all the way to the professional development soft skills side. So if you're interested in something, I bet there's a video or somebody gave a talk on it. So definitely check out the YouTube channel. And then briefly, I mentioned this last month as well. The Graduate Student Working Group has started doing monthly student highlights. So really, you are entered into a pool of candidates anytime you participate in one of our events. So any of you on today that have decided to join us and stay throughout the duration of the webinar will be entered. We highlight 2 different students. Well, I should say, it's not me, it's Natalie and William that highlight 2 students a month. They do a whole profile workup on you guys and then post that on all of our socials as well as LinkedIn. So it provides a lot of visibility. And there's also discussion of putting this into our quarterly newsletter. So I think that's it for in terms of my announcements. I appreciate you listening and thank you all so much for coming. I'm going to turn it over now to Zara York. She is going to introduce our first speaker, Julie Dawson.
All right, thank you, Brittany. So today we're happy to have Julie Dawson join us. And as Brittany mentioned, Julie is my Borlaug Scholar Mentor. She is an associate professor in the Department of Horticulture at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And she did her PhD at Washington State University and was a postdoctoral researcher at Cornell and the French National Institute for Agriculture, Food, and Environment. Her research interests include the use of genetic resources in plant breeding for organic systems and methods for participatory selection and variety development. Julie is the State Extension Specialist for Urban and Regional Food Systems and does applied research for growers serving local food markets. This includes vegetable variety trials, season extension, and reduced tillage methods for small-scale vegetable production. Julie is involved with multiple extension collaborations that can be found on her website in the chat, including seed-linked reduced till organic vegetable production, organic farm manager registered apprenticeship, and urban agriculture production resources. Today, she'll be talking with us about the Seed to Kitchen collaborative, and this works with plant breeders to test varieties with local farmers and chefs and focuses on flavor for local food systems. So it's a really neat collaboration, or collaborative, sorry, and we're excited to have her speaking with us today. So thank you, Julie, and I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation. I have a few slides, mostly for some photos. So I will share those. Is that appearing okay for everyone? Great. So I just wanted to give a little background about myself and then talk mostly today about the Seed to Kitchen brand, if you want to call it that. It's a program that encompasses a lot of the extension and research that I do, and I found it very useful to kind of develop that program identity in internal communication, recruiting participants, communication with the media and others. So I don't know if I would call it a brand per se, but it functions as a brand. And so I think it's appropriate for today's topic. I worked in wheat breeding for about 10 years, and I'm a relative newcomer to vegetables. So I've been working for the past 7 or so years in vegetables and still feeling like I'm learning a lot every day about actual, production and breeding of vegetable crops. I'm not an extrovert by nature. I'm much more introverted. So the role I'm playing in extension, where I am talking to the media and doing a lot of outreach, does not necessarily come naturally. I really enjoy working with people, but I don't enjoy being in the spotlight. And I have always gotten fairly significant stage fright, and it's taken a while to overcome that. And so if you are in that category, don't be scared of developing your own program to kind of put forward, to talk to the media. It does get easier with practice, although the stage fright never completely goes away. But the only way to get that to be easier is to actually do it. And to do it in low stakes environments first, I think. I had a lot of opportunities in grad school and as a postdoc to do things like talk at field days and lead grower meetings, and that kind of practice made my current job a lot easier. So I would take advantage of those opportunities when you get them, even if they are extremely scary right now. I totally understand. They were really scary for me too. But it'll help you a lot later on when you do have to build your own professional programming and make people aware of that and really get buy-in from either your own institution or from external partners. So the Seed to Kitchen collaborative started soon after I got here, although we didn't name it right away. It kind of started as the chef, farmer, plant breeder kind of collaborative project. And it didn't have a name, but the idea was to have chefs, farmers, and plant breeders work together on developing varieties that had really good quality for local markets. And I'm the State Extension Specialist for Urban and Regional Food Systems. That means I work a lot with local producers who are selling through farmers markets, through restaurants, through CSAs. And so quality is the main thing they use to get and keep markets. And if a variety doesn't have flavor, even if it has a lot of other great characteristics, it produces well, it's disease resistant, they are not going to grow it because they can't sell it. Or if they can sell it once, they can't sell it a second time. And so flavor is really the critical thing for them. And Wisconsin was a good place to do this because we have a lot of vegetable breeders. We have a lot of plant breeders in general for a diverse range of crops. So we have a really excellent resource here between the USDA and the university. We have a good group of chefs in Madison and throughout the state. And we have a really vibrant local food scene and farmers that are serving that market. So it was a great place to start an initiative like this. It took off a lot faster than I thought it was going to. The first year we had like 5 farmers and 4 chefs, and then it kind of really ramped up very quickly. So there was a lot of farmer interest, and pretty soon we had about 80 people wanting to do on-farm trials, and we had a lot of chefs involved, and we currently have about 30 plant breeders that contribute varieties to the trials. So as it got going, I realized, okay, we're gonna need to actually frame this as more of a program and not just as, okay, we're doing something because it's an information need and okay, we're gonna do some trials. So my first grad student came up with the name Seed to Kitchen Collaborative, and we got a logo, and that really helped us communicate about what the project was. And it provided this umbrella for a lot of activities that might otherwise be difficult for farmers to follow or find information about. So the main aspects of the Seed to Kitchen Collaborative are variety trials on the research stations where we solicit varieties from breeders. So they say, I want to trial these new varieties and send a seed. We do taste tests with our crew, kind of as a first cut, because we might have 20 to 40 varieties in a trial, and we have about 12 crops that we usually work with. So the crew does the first cut, and then we work with a group of chefs in town to do a second flavor evaluation. And then we also do a number of on-farm trials where we will use the data from the research station to select a subset of varieties that we think are the most promising, kind of like a curated set of the newest things on the market, and then we send them out to on-farm trials. So those are the main components, and those are the stakeholders that we work with. And so having the Seed to Kitchen program as an identifiable program really helps us communicate to each of those stakeholder groups individually, and also to explain the program to people that might not be very familiar with plant breeding or with agriculture at all, who are local food consumers or journalists or other people at the university. So that's one of the benefits I see to really making an effort, a conscious effort, to always refer to the program as Seed to Kitchen when we're talking to farmers. It might be funded by 10 different grants and different pieces for different crops, but instead of saying, well, we're going to work on, the specialty crop block grant from Wisconsin on tomatoes and peppers, it's part of the Seed to Kitchen Collaborative. And we do acknowledge our funders when we're publishing or when we're giving talks or all of that, but farmers and chefs don't want to know all of the different grants that are funding your program. And those grants change over time. So the Seed to Kitchen Collaborative name really makes it possible to have continuity and to have some kind of longevity with this program where funding sources can come and go, but the program itself remains the same. The other piece of the Seed to Kitchen Collaborative that is really important, I think, is communicating with the public. And the public does not necessarily know much about plant breeding. And this project helps us communicate more about what plant breeding can do. Because often, at least in the local food community, people have a lot of misconceptions about what plant breeding is. And they see this dichotomy between heirlooms, which are flavorful and you want to buy them, and modern varieties, which are your grocery store tomato that you don't want to eat. And so we're trying to break down that dichotomy and show people that there are really interesting new varieties being developed that are fantastic for flavor and also have a lot of the characteristics that farmers need. And so having the Seed to Kitchen Collaborative, it's an approachable name. Hopefully it's recognizable over time. We do the same kind of public outreach every year, although COVID obviously canceled a lot of those this year. But we usually do a field day open house at our research station, and then we do a dinner with our chefs where they each do small plate presentations of a new variety that was one of the really exceptional ones from the season. So we try to make plant breeding approachable and try to make it easy for them to ask questions and to find out more and to participate some themselves. The photo at the bottom is from Solveig Hansen's dissertation. She just finished a PhD with Erwin Goldman in our department, and she involved the public in selection of beets for culinary characteristics. And so they actually got to participate in selection and do some of that discernment themselves about which ones they would pick and kind of vote for which ones they thought should be varieties. So one of the key things I think about building a brand or a program identity, especially in extension, and extension is really the outreach, the formal outreach of the university. One of the most critical things about having a program identity is for people to be able to find information and to know where it came from and who to contact if they have questions about that, whether they're farmers, whether they're the media, chefs, the public. And so I have a lab website where we have, a lot of the people involved and the different programs and the different funders. But then we also have a Seed to Kitchen website, which is all of the information from the variety trials, information, whether you're a farmer or a breeder, all of the trial results. And it's clear that, all of this kind of falls under the same program. It's not perfect. It's not always completely up to date. I'm the one that posts stuff, so it's definitely not technically very sophisticated, although I did have a person that actually knows what they're doing build the website. Daniela Echeverra, who's in my program she was an undergrad with some web skills. That is critical. Like if you don't feel like you have the skills to build the website or to design a logo, do get someone who has a good sense of aesthetic to do that, because I definitely don't. And I think that some of the success of the program is that people enjoy spending time on the website or on the Instagram account. And it really helped to have somebody that knew what they were doing actually set it up. So then it's fairly easy to update. I try to keep it updated at the end of every season with all the new trial results. And so the idea here is that people can go to this as a reliable source of information of university variety trials. They know that they were done on the research stations and that we recruited farmers to participate in trialing these varieties. So it's a kind of one-stop shop for information. Obviously, we also publish, grant reports and other stuff, but I find if you have like the tomato variety trials in one spot and then squash in another, people never quite know where to find information. And so then you don't get as many people actually relying on your program for information because they're just not sure where to get that info. So that's one of the things that, it takes some time, and I can't say that I've done it the best. I've tried, but I see other programs that have done a much better job of just like always being out there with new posts, blog entries. That's something that I've kind of decided I don't have the time to do a blog, but I admire people that do, because I think that regular contact and updates and, field reports really helps build up recognition of your program. And so that's one of the things on my list. When I get a lot of free time, I will start a blog. The Instagram account, though, does get quite a bit of traction. It's not big compared to other programs, but for the work we do, it's fairly well followed. I think that having multiple platforms also helps people connect in the way that they want, and kind of having that consistent identity. One thing I really like about having like a Seed to Kitchen Instagram and a Seed to Kitchen website is that I can take myself personally out of it. It's the program that we're promoting. I definitely get very uncomfortable with self-promotion. But since it's a collaborative effort, I find it a lot easier to, kind of continually update it, give people the website, give people the Instagram, encourage them to follow it. And my grad students and other staff can participate. So most of these photos are taken by grad students, posted by grad students. They're able to be part of the Instagram and the website. And so they contribute to this larger program without it having to be like their personal Instagram account or my personal Instagram account, which I don't really have. And I find that much more comfortable than trying to combine, all of the stuff I do for UW into a Dawson Lab Instagram account. Because then, people that aren't really interested in maybe the apprenticeship program, they don't have to go through all of that. And the people that are interested in that program, there's a website for that. For the CG Kitchen, everything is here. And so that's helped me actually do the outreach and the promotion, because it's not just me, it's everybody involved in the program. The last thing I wanted to kind of touch on is communication with the media and communication with kind of the media aspect of the institution. And please do interrupt with questions if you have them as I go. I am not I'm not a media person. This is probably one of the hardest parts of my job, is talking to journalists and talking to people on the radio. It's not something that is comfortable, although it is really useful to get more people participating in the project. And it is also very useful for people to understand more about the value of the public university and extension. And I think that often extension is invisible, and being in the media helps all of extension, and it also helps people understand plant breeding. And so it's something that I do because I see the benefits, not necessarily because I enjoy being in the paper or on the radio. I remember a recent conversation with a journalist. She wanted me to send her some photos, so I did. And she's like, "We want a photo of you." So I sent her one of me in the field where you can barely tell it's me. So she went and found another one of me somewhere else. So that was, yeah, that was probably, I probably should have a few better photos of myself to send to the media. But like I said, it's not something that I enjoy doing. It's something that I find useful because it helps grow the program itself. So there's a few different aspects of the media. One is kind of internal media, and most institutions have internal media people. So UW-Madison has an office that does that for CALS, for the College of Ag and Life Sciences, and for the university. I'm sure private companies also have a group of people that really are for media inquiries and also for putting media out to the public. So these people are usually the easiest ones to deal with, right? They want to make you look good. They want to tell your story. They want to make sure people understand why it's important. They take the time, usually, to understand what you're doing. And so it can be really enjoyable to actually talk to them and work with them, because it'll be a back and forth. They'll ask you, did I get this quote right? Did I describe this part of the project right? Did I get the science right? And it's really kind of a privilege to have someone like that who knows how to write well for the public cover your program. So I would definitely encourage you, if somebody like that reaches out to you, take the time to talk to them, because they want to understand it enough to get it right in their story that goes out to a large number of people usually. This is the cover of the CALS, College of Ag and Life Sciences magazine a few years ago. And most universities have something like this that goes out to alumni or to the general public. So then kind of the next step is, I find talking to like trade journals, or this is from Edible Madison magazine, they are also very friendly media in general, because they admire the work that is going on in agriculture, and they want more people to understand it. And so it's often very easy to talk to this kind of journalist as well, to kind of explain what you're doing and get your story out there. Often these trade journals will also go back and forth with you about, did I get this right? You know, is there an easy way of explaining this? Is this quote correct? And so they're usually fairly easy to work with. It's really good to have, you know, your logo, your website, your social media kind of up to date, ready to share, and then also have some good photos of field work, lab work, you know, yourself, although I don't follow that rule. You know, having good photos to share. Usually they want to send their own photographer. So if you have an event or something, letting a photographer in is a good idea. But keeping your own collection is good too. So then I have just a couple more slides here. The next steps in the media are really kind of making sure that you're very careful in what you say, and that you are aware that anything you say could be quoted without you getting to actually look at it again. And most journals at this point, like journalistic standards for newspapers, don't actually allow them to go back and forth with sources. And so often, you know, people will do like a home and garden public interest piece. That's fairly easy because it's a public interest piece. It's not like fluff, but it's not something where they're doing investigative journalism either. And so you get to tell your story, and usually they do a pretty good job. And it's good publicity because it gets people to actually come to your website and see your program. The main thing to remember is that assume you're on the record all the time, and assume you may be quoted out of context. And it's not necessarily because they're trying to be, you know, because they're trying to catch you out saying something you didn't mean, but they don't have a lot of time either. And you need to be very clear in what you're saying. This is another one, similar, you know, the article comes out really well, but you're not going to get to look at it before it goes to print. And then there's other things that if you're on the radio, the same thing, you're live then usually, so you don't get a chance to necessarily correct yourself. So practicing a few times, getting some sound bites, explaining things in a few words that are not jargon, like, you know, having those things practiced makes a big difference when you actually go to talk to the media. And like I said, you know, having your website, your logo, your you know, other pieces of social media ready to go and ready to share is a big step in kind of building that identity that's easy for the media to interface with. I think with that, I will just kind of point you in the direction of a couple other programs that I think do a really good job of this. Culinary Reading Network is in Portland and affiliated with Oregon State. Oregon State University Barley World does a good job of, you know, kind of maintaining a presence. And then another one from Wisconsin, which isn't breeding per se, but which does a lot of variety trials, is Sean Conley's extension program on corn, soybeans, and small grains. So I want to make sure that I thank other people that have been involved in this program, and that's, I think, a big part of the kind of developing a program and a brand is making sure you credit other people. Like, it needs to be your project if you're the lead, but you also need to make sure to credit everybody else that's involved. And so I couldn't do this without staff, graduate students, undergrads, a lot of the chefs that are involved, and then funders and the breeders. And I went through that fast, but it'll be on the recording if you want to go through and look at all the names of people that are there. So I wanted to make sure I had plenty of time for questions. I can go
and we do have quite a few. Yeah,
what?
so we do have quite a few, Julie. Thanks so much. I think that learning about Seed to Kitchen is it's neat to see that there are different initiatives like that to kind of help promote, you know, plant breeding, give it a better name. So I think one of the big questions that I personally had for you is if you could give some advice on how to overcome stage fright or overcome that initial fear of having to, you know, be the face of something. That would be awesome if you could provide some advice.
Sure. Practice, I think, is the biggest thing, and it's difficult to do. And I will, you know, I'll be the first to say that I still get nervous and I still can get stage fright if I'm in front of a big room. I get more nervous talking about myself, as you can probably tell from this talk, than I do about, I can talk to a group of farmers without much problem. I don't get super nervous if I have a room full of farmers and I'm talking about varieties. If I'm in a situation where I'm talking about something more personal, or where I'm talking to a group of scientists where I really want them to, kind of appreciate what I've done, then I still get quite a bit of stage fright. I think what helped me the most was having to do it frequently in low stakes environments. If you only do it infrequently when the stakes are really high, like a job interview or a big conference talk, it's very, very difficult to tamp down your nerves enough to actually kind of learn from the experience. And so having those experiences in grad school where I did field day presentations was really helpful. As a postdoc, I organized workshops and I did more of the organization and leading of field days, and that was really helpful because you have to get up and not only do you have to like talk about your project, but you have to like make the announcements and tell everyone where the bathrooms are and all of those kind of logistical details. And so those are really low stakes kind of, low stakes events. It's something that you really want to go well, but it's not like a job interview. And most people are pretty forgiving if you mess up and have to like start over or whatever. I think with extension, once I got here, I was doing so many talks because that's kind of the expectation, that I didn't have time to work up all my nerves for like 3 days before a talk, because I was giving a talk, every other day or whatever. And it was often on a similar topic. And so I got better at kind of observing myself and saying, okay, well, that worked well, that didn't. And so I gained a little bit more confidence in my ability to give a talk to growers. It's not perfect. It's always a learning process. I'm not the best speaker, but I don't get totally panicked anymore when I go to speak to a room of growers. I still have to practice more when I'm talking to a scientific audience, or when I'm doing something that's more high stakes, when I'm talking to like hundreds of growers or something rather than a room full of 30, or when I'm doing a more formal presentation rather than a field day. But the practice on the low stakes helps me with the higher stakes presentations. I think also, like, if you are speaking about something you're really comfortable with, and it's also something that's not just your work, it's a shared project, that makes me more comfortable because I'm promoting what other people are doing, and that kind of takes some of the pressure off. Will people like the work that I've done? It's not quite just me, it's everybody else. And so working collaboratively has also kind of inexplicably helped the stage fright. And I think it's mostly because I'm not as worried about whether people will like what I've done, because it's a collaborative project.
Yeah, so I think like just even on that note of collaboration, your last 3 slides show how well you are, or how good you are at putting together this collaborative network. So can you maybe touch a little bit on how you put that network together and how you add value to the people in that network?
Yeah, I think it kind of emerged in a way as a collaborative project from the beginning. And I didn't initially think that I would be the one leading it, or that it would be such a central part of my programming. So we had this idea to start talking about whether we could develop varieties for flavor after a conference at the Stone Barn Center for Food and Agriculture, where Erwin Goldman, who is the chair of our department and the beet breeder, was there. So he's the beet breeder for Wisconsin, and he also does processing carrots. And then Tori Miller, who's a very well-known chef in Madison, was there. And the three of us decided, hey, this would be a great thing to do in Madison. And so with a few of the grad students who were already doing on-farm trials, we kind of got together a meeting of farmers who were interested in chefs. And then it kind of took off. And it really built by word of mouth at first. And I think the most important thing was that we had regular meetings to see what people wanted to get out of it, and then try to respond quickly to, changes, requests for changes in the direction. So at first, we were asking the chefs to rate all the varieties from like 1 to 5, and it quickly became apparent that that was boring after a while, and that what they really wanted was unique varieties. They wanted to taste some really good varieties that were easier for farmers to produce. And they didn't necessarily want the best tasting variety on the planet. They wanted the one that they would be able to buy in enough quantity for their restaurant, which meant that farmers had to be able to grow it. And they were really committed to keeping the farmers in business. And so we shifted a little to make sure that we were doing varieties that would work in kind of a staple way, where they weren't necessarily oddballs, right? They were, kind of bell peppers or Corno de Toro, or the narrow peppers. We have orange and purple carrots, so they're not necessarily all novel, but the idea is to find something that works well for the chefs and the farmers. The farmers, they really want to know what their peers think of the varieties, and the breeders want to know whether the farmers would grow them again. And so we really pared down our data collection so that it was less time for the farmers, and so that it was really focused on what they wanted to know from their peers and what breeders wanted to know. They didn't want yield data and all of that. They wanted to know, like, is this good enough for the farmer to grow it again? Would they buy the seed? And so responding to those and responding to like, okay, it would be better if we got stakes and stuff with the seed because it's hard to set this up, so now we send them like everything. I think that helps people stay involved because they see that when they give feedback, there's a change. And it's focused on what they actually want to get out of the project rather than, whatever we as researchers think would be like the best data possible we could get out of this, which would be like every trait measured on every farm, right? So there's always some compromises, there's a lot of discussion, but I think the main thing is to listen to the people that you're working with.
That's great. So we have some questions on media. So we'll kind of jump to that topic that you touched on. So this is a two-part question. So first, how do you deal with negative or just criticism from the media? And the second part of that is, have you ever turned down the request to be interviewed by public interest media? And if so, why?
I don't think I've ever turned down a request from a legitimate press person. As Extension, we're expected to respond to those requests. I certainly have not bent over backwards for a couple of them, but I have tried to be accommodating as much as possible to media requests. If somebody, wants an hour-long interview the next day and photos on site and I'm out of town, like, I can just say, I'm really sorry. So those kinds of things do happen occasionally. But for the most part, I respond to all media requests, but I might be, I'll spend more time with media that I feel are taking the subject seriously than media who might be trying to, sometimes there are media that want to either minimize the value of local food or potentially criticize organic agriculture. Like I try very hard not to criticize conventional agriculture or other people's breeding work. And so I try to avoid media that might do the same for the work that I'm doing. But I don't avoid them in the sense that I don't respond to them. I just don't necessarily spend as much time with them.
Great. Yeah, I can imagine dealing with media is a whole nother another thing that could probably be a whole talk because it seems incredibly intimidating. So we had a question on a particular application or platform. One of the individuals participating wanted to know if you'd ever used Medium. I guess it's a platform to showcase different research. They were just curious if you had ever used it. They posted a link in there, which I can forward it to you afterwards as well. Yeah, they were curious if you had ever
Yeah, I
used
don't think
that.
I've ever heard of that one.
Okay.
I've gotten a few requests from platforms that want to tell your story and want to like write an article about you, but then want to charge you for it, and those I don't respond to.
Sure.
But I don't know if that's the case with this one. I definitely I'll look at it after this.
Cool. One person also asked, are there any resources or organizations within student groups, universities, or national extensions that can help a social media presence or a professional presence?
Are there any?
So I think maybe this
I
person's, go ahead, sorry.
Most universities will have somebody in their media office that can help you, not necessarily set up a website, but at least give you some tips. I know I talked to a couple people in that office when I was first starting Extension about tips for working with the media. And things like, assume you're always on the record and that kind of, I think they helped me realize that most mistakes in journalism are because the journalists are also very, very busy. And so then it was a less intimidating conversation when I realized that I just had to explain it clearly. They weren't going to intentionally misrepresent what I was saying. That may not be true all the time, but I think most of the time, the journalist is just not necessarily an expert in your subject and has a lot of articles that they're working on. So I would definitely reach out to your media office, whoever that is at your institution. If you get a call from the media, they are more than happy to help you with it. Social media presence or professional presence, I'm not as familiar with that. I don't have a big social media presence other than the Instagram account for the Seed to Kitchen Collaborative. We don't really use Twitter. We rely on the website and on a few listservs mostly. So I'm probably not the best person to answer that question.
Great. So another question that we had is, could you potentially provide some advice on how do you share your research with non-technical people?
Yeah, I mean, I'm fortunate in working with food crops that are actually destined for local food systems because that makes it a lot easier to share with non-technical audiences. Like I can invite people to a dinner and they can eat it and kind of experience what we're trying to do. I think that I would practice talking about your research in terms of why it matters, not necessarily all of the details of what you're doing, but what the objectives are. Because most people can understand the objectives of plant breeding research. Whether you're at a big company or a institution like, a university, most of the time you're working on a concrete goal. Even if you're working on, the very basic start of that, say you're in the molecular breeding unit or something, obviously, the stuff you do in the lab isn't going to end up on someone's plate directly, but you may be contributing to more disease resistant crops or to some other objective that people can really understand easily. And so I would kind of boil it down to, very little about the technical details and a lot about why you're doing that and why it matters to people. Because I think people do get excited about the goals of plant breeding. They just don't necessarily make it through all the details to the goals if you start with the details. At least that's what I found.
Yeah, that's great. So also to even maybe discuss that question just a little bit more, there's also interest in how, if you can maybe provide some pointers on how using a blog, or you said like your Instagram account or the website, to even to communicate with people who say are going to Google you, right? The non-technical audience in that way too.
Yeah, so I am not a good blog writer, so I won't respond on that one so much because I tried at the beginning and realized that I didn't have the time and I didn't have the talent to write short summaries of what we were doing in a way that was interesting. I like the Instagram quite a bit because what we do is we just give people little snapshots of what we're doing. So when we're packing seeds in the winter to send out to farmers, we'll take a picture of the lab like covered in seed packets and all of the different stations for the crops that are like getting packed in an assembly line, and just say like, we're getting ready to ship you all seeds. If you still want to sign up for trials, here's the link or whatever. We did the same thing with some of our tasting events where we would just take a picture of the different things that we were tasting. Or this year we have to do all of our tastings as like drop sites. So I had everybody take a picture of like their tasting kit at home and then put together a little thing with Instagram. And so it's really easy to just give people a bit of an insight into what you're doing. And I found that that serves the same purpose as a blog, but is way less work. And, photos are fun. People will scroll through them and you can give the little 2-sentence update. And then sometimes we throw in things like our carrot phenotyping method, where we're doing carrot top heights with barcodes, barcode rulers. And that's not directly related to, this variety tastes better, but having better top height competes better with weeds, makes the variety easier to grow, and we can explain a little bit more about what plant breeding actually is by showing them this photo, or a photo of a tomato hornworm, and like, this thing eats tomatoes. We're trying to find varieties that aren't as tasty for this, very, very large caterpillar. And people like that kind of thing because it's quick to read, it's engaging, and it gives them a little better sense about what you're actually doing.
Great. So we have probably about like 2.5 minutes. And so there's one more question, and it kind of takes us back to the very start when you started answering questions on stage fright. And this person's interested in, what role do peers play in helping with stage fright, or conversely, humbleness?
It's a good way to reframe it, I guess. Yeah, so I think, having peers help you practice really helps. Sometimes it's actually harder to give a talk to your peers, like as a practice, than it is to give it in front of a room full of strangers. And so, having a friendly audience is not always easier. And so it can still be very good practice. It doesn't feel like, you're just goofing off or whatever. It feels like you're actually giving a talk and you want them to think you're doing a good job. And so it can create some of that same anxiety, and it can also help you get through it, because it really doesn't matter if you do a good job in front of your group of grad student friends or your group of, your lab group. They're there to help you. And so I think as a peer, you can be very supportive and still, offer suggestions for improvement. But just being there, listening to it helps. And then as somebody that's trying to get more practice, like, do that frequently. Maybe have, the equivalent of a journal club, but it's like everybody has to give a 5-minute presentation of their latest results. And then, have some suggestions about how to improve it or how to make it clearer, the graph clearer or whatever. Just have a discussion about it, but do it in a way that, you're doing it frequently, and you're doing it in a way that's not threatening to, it doesn't really matter how well you do, you're just going to keep improving.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Yeah, and that resonates with me. I think I get more nervous when I had to present to my own friends, to a room full of my my advisors. So I think that's all the time we have for questions. So thank you so much, Julie. That was really great. So I'm gonna start sharing my screen. And Julie, actually, I should ask before we transition to Elzondi, if people are interested in reaching out to you or contacting you, can you maybe throw in the chat an email or something that'd be helpful?
Yeah, definitely. The next 2 weeks are kind of busy with extensions, so if you email me and you don't hear back right away, I will get back to you eventually, but I'll put my email in the chat.
Great. Okay, can you guys see my screen? Perfect. Okay, I see some nods. Okay, so thanks again, Julia. Really appreciate it. I get the pleasure of introducing our second speaker today. So that is Elzondi Usthuzian. And I have to admit, I'm actually pretty excited to have her agreed to join us for this webinar today. I was first introduced to Elzondi when I listened to an interview where she just discussed women in STEM on the Women in Food and Agriculture podcast back in 2020. From there, I've always felt very inspired and encouraged by her success as a woman in the crop science realm, as well as the fact that she's an advocate for women, children, and families in the workplace. So Elzondi is Asia Pacific Marketing Lead at Bayer. She started her 16-year career with Legacy Monsanto in South Africa and has held global and regional roles across the company, including seed and traits, crop protection, and vegetable. Most recently, she was part of the Monsanto corporate strategy team, where she led teams that implemented integrated strategies to create value in new categories, including data science and plant health and fertility in developing world regions. In addition to her work with Bayer and Legacy Monsanto, Elzondi is incredibly passionate about promoting diversity and inclusion, as well as helping empower women. She demonstrates this passion through her involvement in several initiatives, including being the executive sponsor for Legacy Monsanto's Supplier Diversity Mentoring Program, president of the Legacy Monsanto Women's Network and Global Give Back Circle Mentors. She also is on the advisory board for the 2019 Women in Food and Agriculture event and was named an Eisenhower Fellow for the Zhizing 2017 program. And I apologize if I didn't say that correctly. Elzondi holds several prestigious degrees, including a Bachelor's of Science in Natural Science and Mathematics and a Bachelor of Science honors in genetics from the University of Pretoria. She also holds a Master's of Science in Agricultural and Horticultural Plant Breeding from the University of the Free State and an MBA from Northwest University in South Africa. Prior to working in the corporate setting, she taught postgraduate mathematics and high school science and math for 6 years. So I would say she's incredibly qualified. Today, Elzondi is going to be talking to us about how to distinguish yourself individually in a crowded marketplace and just sharing some of her experience. So with that, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Brittany. I appreciate that very nice introduction. That sounds like someone else that you're talking about. Julie, I really enjoyed your talk. I was fortunate enough to be the global product manager for the vegetable seed business for 3 years early on in my career. And I could associate with so many things that you said. I really enjoyed that. That was brilliant. And I think Julie and myself are a very good combination to do this talk with you guys, because I would definitely not classify myself as an extrovert, but I think I'm very much in the middle between introvert and extrovert. And I found a few things that I've applied throughout my career that really help to breach some of the things that Julie already touched on that might not be comfortable, but there's tricks that you can apply to help you through it. So I'm indeed going to focus on a little bit more of how do you navigate the corporate space. If you end up in a bigger company where it's a more structured system on the work that you're going to work in, how do you as an individual navigate that brand that you built for yourself and all the dynamics and nuances that comes with a bigger company. So I'll start off with a little bit of an introduction. Brittany did a very nice job to summarize where I come from, but I'm going to put it a little bit more in a layman's language. If you would walk into my office, you would think that I have an ordinary job and that perhaps I just graduated from high school and went on to college and started working my way up the corporate ladder. But the reality is, my career did not take such an organized linear path. And yours doesn't either need to be like that. That should not be the expectation. It should be the exception if your career really just follow that linear path. I was born and raised in South Africa. I did indeed go to university and did a bachelor's in genetics and mathematics. And at that point in time, I was really thinking about entering the medical space from a medical physics angle. And very quickly, the university discontinued the course, and I had to change where I was heading. So I went on further into genetics and mathematics. And as soon as I touched genetics, I knew that I would end up in plant breeding. Yeah, I was very much intrigued by it, and I grew up on a farm. So I could see the immediate impact and application. And I'll touch on a little bit more on that later on. The math teaching was more of a passion. I started doing it as I was educating myself further, and I really just enjoyed tutoring and teaching, and then the job just sort of show up. And at the same time, I was building a career while getting married and starting a family. Now, here's the unexpected thing. While I was teaching, I did some part-time breeding work for Monsanto back then. But I was very clear that I will end up in the commercial space, which was very foreign for the breeders that I was surrounded with. They offered me more permanent roles in the company in breeding, but I specifically turned those down because I was very adamant, if I want to be in a position where I run a company one day, I have to do some job in sales. I need to touch my customer and understand how they perceive and experience my products. So I was very hard-headed and set my mind on the fact that I need to enter the corporate world through sales, because once you advance your career, it's very hard to go back to a sales job. But the problem was there were no females in sales in South Africa at that point in time. It was a white male dominated industry, like many other countries. There was a caution and a perceived risk with sending a female to farmers in rural areas to sell seed and plant trials and attend farmer meetings. But luckily, the company was the first to take the step in that direction. And I can definitely tell you my science background and the plant breeding knowledge and experience that I had was one of the key factors that distinguished me from everyone that I was competing with in that space. And also, it helped me to be patient, wait till my audience gets stuck on a topic, and I could come from a different angle and offer potential solutions. It really helped me to work through some of the barriers that I experienced and also distinguish and differentiate myself. So I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about how do you equip yourself to be the best candidate to land the right job. Equipping yourself to be the absolute best candidate, which leads you to navigate this competitive job market. That is also directly related to the world that you guys live in currently. And job hunting can be very overwhelming. But there's a few critical steps that you could make to ensure that this process becomes a little bit easier and that you take control of the things that feels completely beyond your control. Start by thinking about what it is that you would like to experience, but most importantly, what you would like to learn early on in your career. You don't need your dream job at this point in time. You need to build up experience and learn different things. You need jobs that expose you to different things, that stretch you to start understanding your own abilities, your strengths, your weaknesses, your limitations, to acquire an education, a degree. That's the easy part. That's the part where your natural abilities helps you to accomplish what you need to accomplish. To navigate the softer, more complex space within a job, That's the more challenging piece. And that's where you really need to do some deep soul searching to thoroughly understand how everything that's packaged within yourself comes to play when you're actually doing your job. Early experiences help you discover what it is that you want to achieve for the next 40 years. After 40 years, you should be able to look back and say, you know what, I did make it happen. Um, do not be blindsided by what is exactly in front of you. You should rather look further into the horizon and ensure that every step that you take brings you closer to what it is that you want to look back on when you reach the end of the 40 years. Um, and some important topics that you need to think about as you start do some job hunting is, what is the culture of the organization? Now, this seems like theoretical stuff, but I can tell you, once you're part of a team and an organization, the culture is very much going to determine how you operate, how you communicate, whether you enjoy your day job. So it's critical that you get a good feeling for how does this company operate. And us that very recently went through a merger, Monsanto being acquired by Bayer, we did a deep analysis as part of the job that I had in strategy on the two companies and the cultures. And there were a lot of similarities, but I can tell you there were a few distinct differences. And I knew it. I knew the theory behind it. I understood it very well. Being from South Africa, living for 9 years in the United States, I think I was one of the best people that best understood the cultural differences between a German company and an American company. But once you start operating within this space, those few differences feels much bigger than what it felt like when you looked at it on paper. So it's really important that you understand the culture of the organization that you're looking at. The second thing is the mission and the vision of the organization. And for me, it directly feeds into my personal brand. What is it that I feel passionate about? And I'm going to touch a little bit later on your elevator speech, how you describe why you do what you do. And for me, the mission and the vision of the organization is directly, or should directly link to what you do. You have to realize the technical or scientific world that you live in, purely from where you guys' area of expertise is very different from the real world and how you explain to the average person on the street and the average consumer what it is that drives you every day. And then the third thing is, you have to understand, now that you understand the culture of the organization, what is it that this organization wants to accomplish? What's the mission and the vision? You have to understand how you as an individual can add value in achieving that mission. How can you learn along the way as you contribute and help the organization to get closer to that end goal? When you go into the interview, you have to be crystal clear and have a lot of clarity and be able to speak to exactly what I just described with confidence and conviction, because it's you convincing the hiring manager and the HR team that you understand what you're getting into, and you also understand where you are strong and can immediately plug and play. At the same time, you have identified the opportunities for growth and development, and understand how you're going to learn while you're doing this job. Now, let's switch a little bit to how do you differentiate yourself from the people that you're competing with. That's the second thing that I thought I need to drill a little bit deeper on. It's important that you position yourself in a way that people can remember you. Now, Julie have touched on this. She does not want the light to shine on her. She does not want to be the center of attention. And most of the scientists that I worked with, have that philosophy. They don't necessarily enjoy to be the center of attention, but they enjoy their topic, what they feel passionate about, to be the center of attention. Here is the good news. It's very simple. You distinguish yourself by being brutally authentic, be real, and just live your passion. If you focus on the topic that you feel truly passionate about, you do not try to shape yourself and be someone that you not naturally would try to be, you would not feel uncomfortable. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay not to be the best speaker in the room. If you remain focused on using your strengths to live your passion, the energy will show and people will remember you, and you will be differentiated from the people around you. Because unfortunately, in corporate world, there is a lot of people that get caught up in the fun and the games and the politics around this space. So if you can just stick to your strengths and your passions, you'll be perfectly fine. I've touched on the first step in this process of how do you differentiate yourself. It's really to equip yourself, ensuring that you are the absolute best qualified candidate. Education and daily learning. Look for opportunities to equip yourself with additional skills and qualifications. Really turn yourself to become that lifelong learner. It's a mindset and a lifestyle. And it's very easy to do that, especially if you thoroughly understand your strengths and your weaknesses, because you will quickly identify where is the areas that I need to adopt a few more skills to help me bridge some of those development areas. If it's, for example, public speaking, there are very nice courses and trainings you can do that teach you very simple things to bridge some of the things that really is a hurdle for you and you don't even realize it. If it is about navigating social media or interacting with media in general, there's a lot of additional skills and trainings that's not time consuming and also not that expensive, that can really help you improve and grow and develop yourself. After you've ensured that you are the best qualified candidate, identify the job that is a balance between requiring the skill set that you have already secured. In other words, utilizing your qualification and your strengths, but at the same time, offer opportunities for you to learn new things. I myself have this philosophy. I seek roles where at least 50% of the new job should be something that's completely new to me. I've never done it before. I don't know how to do it, and I don't necessarily have the qualification. That 50% is my opportunity to develop and to learn and to grow myself. The other 50% is the value that I can add immediately due to my past qualifications or experiences. You don't need to have a 50-50 philosophy. You can have a 60-40 or a 70-30, but ensure that the job offers you some growing and learning opportunities. Otherwise, you're going to get into that phase of hitting the autopilot mode very quickly, and it's going to be boring. You're not going to enjoy it because there's not going to be enough to learn from and stretch you and challenge you. The third thing is, once you've secured that successful role, you have to focus 100% on performance. Performance is single-handedly the one thing that will differentiate you from everybody around you. Ensure that you exceed everyone's best expectations and not just focusing on yourself. Focus on the team and what the team jointly and individually need to accomplish. So you have to go the extra mile to ensure that you do everything in your power to help your teammates and the group jointly to achieve and be successful. This is critical since it is a competitive landscape. everybody is ambitious and want to move forward, but not everybody is thinking necessarily about the people around them. And if you can find the capacity and the empathy to focus on the people around you and help them show up better and be better at what they're doing, you will earn trust and credibility. And most needed recognition and support from the group around you. People recognize great leadership in those that serve the people around them. Yes, there definitely are leaders that's more vocal and out there and self-serving, but those are not the great leaders. Those are not the people that will be remembered for a long time. If you focus on us as a team need to be successful, and I personally am willing to go that extra mile to help you achieve your goal, and you can still have the credit for it, that's when people start following you and recognize a leader in you. If you're successful in these 3 steps, the 4th one will follow automatically. The next opportunity will present itself. You don't need to go look for it. You don't need to go search for it. If you perfectionize the 3 first steps, a well-deserved and appropriate timed opportunity will align with your personal readiness to go to that next opportunity. And then you just go back to step 1. Make sure that before you take that next opportunity, it's something that offers you growth and learning so that you can develop yourself along this journey. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about what matters, what attracts attention. And there's a few things that you need to keep in mind. The job environment, the corporate world environment, especially in agriculture, is going through a tremendous evolution. It's changing as we speak. It's not the old school historical industry as it was many years ago or a few decades ago. It's modern, it's hip, it's sexy, it is interesting. There is unlimited opportunities in agriculture. And all the topics that many of the Fortune 500 companies have started picking up on and realizing is now very relevant and very important in agriculture as well. And there's a few that I want to highlight. Inclusion and diversity is not just a topic that everybody talks about because it's necessary. It's because it improves profitability. There's real research that shows if you drive and utilize and implement inclusion and diversity, your profit line goes up. The curve goes into the right direction. So as an individual, I would strongly, strongly recommend you to think about this long and hard, because probably for many of you where you're at this point in time, unless you were fortunate enough to go study overseas or be pulled abroad, you have grown up in a very homogeneous environment. The people around you look like you, they sound like you. And many times when you're in plant breeding or in a specific area of expertise, they even think like you. But the real value of a team and a group of people is to get people around a table that think differently. People that's comfortable enough to speak up and challenge each other so that we as a team can show up stronger. A plan that's built through a diverse viewpoint is always a better plan than one that's built from a group of people that's 100% like-minded. The second thing is that you need to realize, regardless of whether you go anywhere, it's very rarely that you will work alone. You will be part of a team. And the team is always stronger than the strongest individual member. Never ever think or imagine that you should be in the place where you do things on your own. It's okay to ask. It's okay to speak up if you think there's a better way of doing things than what you notice someone else is actually approaching it on. That's how we learn from each other. That's how we support each other. And that's how the group collectively grows. And that brings me to the next step. When you get to the place where you start appointing people, a people manager, um, it's bulletproof if you surround yourself with people that is smarter than you. Never ever feel threatened by the people that you surround you with. That's one of the few things that you can control 100%. The people that you hire people that is smarter than you, and you can be 100% certain you will reach and achieve your goals. If you don't do that, you're going to have to do some heavy lifting to develop these people to get them there. And then lastly, authenticity and humbleness goes all the way. If you stay with your feet on the ground, you focus on the task at hand, I promise you, you will reach whatever it is that you set out for yourself to achieve. All of us have certain topics that we feel very passionate about. Usually those topics is something that naturally illustrate positive energy for each of us. And it's also where we draw our energy from. Therefore, it's critical that you think about this and you determine what topics it is that you feel passionate about and contribute into those areas to build it and have it become part of your personal brand. It should be one component of who you are, what you stand for, and what it is that people hear and see and think about when they think about you as an individual. Most of the companies have networks, professional networks or resource networks that works on these topics and advance the organization and the culture into a certain direction, or even just a work stream that focus on one of these topics. So I would strongly recommend that you volunteer and contribute in these spaces, or even take up leadership positions in these areas if there's a topic that you do feel specifically passionate about, and help the company advance in this area. If there is no such effort or a work stream, then you can be the one that actually initiate the effort and advance the group of people, regardless of what organization you work for in this area. Now, let's switch to the elevator speech. You have to take ownership of your own destiny. And I will tell a little story here. Early on in my career, there was a lot of perceptions. And I'll call out one of the things that I encountered. I was part of the Europe, Middle East and Africa organization. And within Monsanto, there was very much a belief that you cannot advance your career into the United States directly from South Africa. You first have to relocate to Europe. And for my personal situation, my husband had a very successful career at that point in time as well. The opportunity was not as attractive if we had to move to Europe first. So we had a preference to move straight into the United States. And despite a lot of people that were telling me it's absolutely just not possible, you have to go through Europe, I never ever paid much attention to it. I felt that if I focus on performance and I apply for the jobs with the theory that I just described, the opportunities will open up regardless of the location. And that's exactly how it worked out. So my point is, do it your own way, not the way that you have seen it done from previous generations. We're living in a different world. Recognize that you can have it all. It does not necessarily include you have to do things the same way that the previous generations did. When I say you can have it all, what I mean is you take ownership of how you're going to do it. How are you going to have it all? You have to get creative, be bold, humble, but bold. If you believe that you can pull it off as an individual, despite the fact that everyone before you believed that's not the way to do it, then you stand by it and you live by it. A a few things that you need to think about is, especially for you guys, life have changed in the sense of family life and the roles that you and your life partner or your spouse plays within the family. It's much more a team effort today. There's many families that have dual careers, that have children while they're having it. And this is something that I personally feel very passionate about. Many times when I speak to audiences, college audiences or just graduated groups, there's a belief that I can't necessarily have a family and a successful career. And that's absolutely not true. Yes, it might mean that you sleep a little bit less and you juggle a few more balls for a few years. But if you surround yourself with a good support system, anything is possible. Um, Another thing that's really important is build your confidence. Confidence comes from within. You have to be very comfortable in your own skin, understanding and liking, enjoying who you are, your strengths, your weaknesses. The weaknesses is the things you just have to live with. You can't do anything about them, and we all have them. The development opportunities, the things that maybe with a few tweaks and tricks, you can work on those and you can improve on those. But the reality is your strengths is the things that's going to help you bridge the other two. So take time to think about this and be brutally honest with yourself and know what these are, and ask people close to you how they see you, how they perceive you, and go and reflect on it, especially the negative things. If you can get comfortable with people giving you critical negative feedback, that's a gift that you can use to really understand, how do I show up to the world? And how do I tweak and change how I show up so that people actually perceive me the way that I intend them to perceive me, rather than how it just naturally comes across? So you have to be able to tell your story in 2 minutes with conviction. Now, I'm going to tell you my story, but here's the thing. Your story should not be something about education or technicalities or what it is that you want to do on your project. Your story should be a story. It should be something that people want to remember. Something that when they see your face, they can forget your name, but they have to remember your story. And mine is very simple. Growing up in South Africa and traveling the world through many different roles that I was privileged enough to have at Monsanto, I had the privilege to meet and see how different people live in their local communities around the world. And the one thing that was very evident to me is there's a great need and severe poverty out there. I can tell you a career in agriculture is meaningful in more ways than many other industries. I personally have a great passion, and Brittany mentioned it, for children and elderly people. These are the two segments of the human population that must rely on others like us to take care of them. And many times those others do not share the same sense of responsibility that I have. Almost half of the world's population live on less than $2.50 per day. According to UNICEF, 22,000 children die every day due to poverty. Around 27% of the children in developing countries are estimated to be underweight. This is what you and I do on a daily basis. The agricultural industry is working to address these challenges that face the world. And this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. That's the elevator speech. You tell the story of why you enter this space. Why do you do your job? So that's from my end, just a quick one on how do you position yourself in a way where you bring your passion and what you do together so that people can remember it. The last topic that I quickly want to touch on is just agriculture and how do you explore the future in ag? How do you navigate a career that can go anywhere and you really the artist and you determine where you go? just as you must write your own script for your future, you can also envision a career in ag that looks different from your friends and your relatives and the people that probably inspired you to go into breeding. A career in ag can mean anything. There are many options that might not come immediately to mind. We're moving into the digital era for ag. There is very simple things. I'm not talking about advanced predictive analytics. There are very simple things that we as average consumers do on our smartphones on a daily basis that farmers around the world don't necessarily do for their business. And these are spaces that offer opportunities for people like you and me to use our skill set and our abilities in a very different way. So I just want to emphasize, please look beyond what's meeting the eye. The scope and the opportunity is very broad. Whether you're a farmer or you're working in the agricultural company or in academia, the sky truly is the limit. So I want to wrap up with a few things that I want you to go think about. When you think about having it all, what it is that you want to accomplish, what does this mean to you? What exactly would make you feel like you have had it all? And then the second thing is, who defines what matters and what you can accomplish? And my answer to that question is, you do. You write and determine your own destiny. Nobody else is responsible to do that. So what do you do about it? You own it. You act like you are going to make it happen. And you don't rely on others to do it for you. Where do you find your confidence? Because it's easy to say this, it's another thing to do it. In the fact that you deserve it. It's not easy to qualify yourself and to be where you're at. You deserve to make the most of your career and advance as fast and as far as you possibly can. And then lastly, why agriculture? Because this is the one and single most important place where we can have a bigger impact and reach further than any other industry offer us the opportunity to do so. So with that, Brittany, I'm going to stop there and see if there's any questions.
Yeah, so I have quite a few in my Google Doc here, but wow, it's basically really, I think, sums up how I'm feeling about your talk. So thank you so much. I think you've given us a lot to think about and a lot, I would say I'm pretty inspired. I think we're all in the right career field. So I did get a question from Catherine. She wants to know, how important is it to pursue a business degree besides just plant breeding, and how was it helpful in your career?
So for me, it was very relevant because I was very clear since day one that I want to run a business. So I knew that to run a business, I can't just rely on science and scientific education. I need to equip myself with something that's business related. And that's why I did the MBA. But really, it's not a necessity. It depends on what it is that you want to accomplish and achieve. And you can always do that business degree later on. It is very helpful, even if you stay in the research and development area, it is helpful to understand the nuances of the broader business. Because the products that you build can only go through to the consumer and to the end user if you understand that side of the business. Also, another thing that I've observed, so keep in mind, since I joined corporate world, I never went back to R&D. I've always stayed on strategy and commercial roles, but I worked very closely with breeders all throughout my career. And what I've noticed some of the best breeders doing, they stay very close to the customer. So when they have trials, when they're out in the field, they will always invite farmers. They will ask the feedback, especially in the fruits and vegetable role that I had, where I spend a lot of time around the world in fields with breeders. They would invite big audiences, whether it's from the retail part of the industry or farmers themselves, or sometimes even consumers, into the field, asking them for feedback. And those were the most successful and advanced breeders that I've worked with. So It is helpful to have that business degree, but it's not an absolute must-have.
Great. So this is a really good question, I think, because it touches on kind of the decisions I think that a young scientist early on in their career, especially since a lot of our audience today is grad students, so we still haven't really started that career yet. So how do you deal with those large course changes in a career without feeling too overly defeated or that you've been thrown off your projected timeline?
So that's an important one. And I think for me, especially on my journey, I think when we go into college, we are so young and we still have a very fixed idea of what the opportunities is out there and how we're going to fit ourselves into those opportunities and into that space. The reality is very, very different, and it's changing. It's not stagnant. It's advancing and evolving, and you need to be flexible and comfortable enough with change to be open-minded and see it for what it is. When you're busy equipping yourself with an education and things change on you, it's really not a big deal. Even if it feels overwhelming, now my plan is changing on me as I'm executing it, you're going to look back at this and you're going to forget that it even happened. It's just going to happen. It's just going to set into a new course. So my advice would be, don't overthink it. Yes, have something in mind that will get you off the ground. But once that plane starts flying, it can go many different directions. It's more important that you do equip yourself with a solid start so that you can get the plane off the ground. And then secondly, be open-minded, look further into the horizon and don't just look at what's right in front of you. Look at the scope of opportunities. And sometimes you're going to go into a direction and you're going to realize, you know what, this was a good learning, but it's not really what I enjoy to do. And you can change direction. No decision is permanent and no decision will push you into a direction where you can't change. You can always adjust course.
Great. So this is a good one as well. So how do you navigate the many cultural differences and foster these differences within the corporate space?
So for me, growing up in South Africa, it's a country where there's 11 national languages. Different cultures and different way of thinking was sort of part of who I am and how I grew up. And then the first job that I had in corporate world was in Europe, Africa. So the organization was very different. And me with my strong accent, I was not the only one with an accent. Everybody had an accent, which was lovely. When I moved to the United States, I was the odd one out. I managed a portion of our US business for a long time, and I actually had the heart of the Corn Belt. Iowa was my main focus. And I recognized in the beginning when I would speak to a big audience of farmers and retailers, they will be frowning, and I can see that this accent does not necessarily, is not appreciated by the audience. And my response will be, listen, I'm not going anywhere. You need to tell me to speak slower and explain a little bit more or work on my grammar. But until you love me and you understand me, I'm going to be right here. So my answer to the question is embrace it. Be comfortable with it, even if you're the odd one out. See it for what it is. Keep it simple. Don't overthink it, and stay focused on the task at hand, because that's the common ground. Even if you have a group of people that think very differently and have very different beliefs, all of us wants to be successful in the goal that we have in front of us. And as long as you keep that as the foundation, to be okay with different opinions and have a good, healthy debate about every topic, you as a team will come out stronger on the other end.
Great. So this one kind of touches also on when you mentioned a few times getting really comfortable with your weaknesses, and that's probably something that's maybe a little scary for some of us. So how should we think critically about our strengths and weaknesses? And do you have any tips on how to address these? Would this be through mentorship, or you also touched a little bit on like outside training as well?
Yeah, I think, and it's very natural to struggle with that. For me, early on in my career, that was probably one of the big hurdles that I had to overcome as well, especially if you're someone that wants to be successful. If you set very high standards for yourself and you're not comfortable with failure, then getting critical or negative feedback do not feel good, because you want to be successful and you want to exceed people's expectation. And to hear from someone that you did not do that, it sort of hurt your feelings. But the reality is you need to get beyond the point where you have this personal connection with it. You should see it as a professional topic. And the only way that you can work on these and be more aware and conscious and show up more effectively to the group and to the benefit of the group is by asking the feedback. And what I did for myself, and I'm not saying this is necessarily the right way to do it, but it worked for me, is I would ask people specifically. I would go to them and say, listen, even people that don't like me, those are the most important ones. I would go to them up front and I will probe it and I will say, listen, I need feedback. I have some things that I want to work on. I'm not sure if I'm working on the right things, but please observe me. We have a meeting that's upcoming, or I'm going to do a presentation. I would sincerely appreciate your critical feedback afterwards. I'm especially interested in the negative things. Not everyone is comfortable giving that. So, but you have to give them a little bit of a heads up so that they can prepare for it and think about it. Then, once you receive the negative feedback, you have to be mature enough to understand which of the feedback is ill-intentioned, especially if you go to people that don't necessarily like you, and what part of the feedback is real. This is something that you also know, you just don't like to acknowledge it about yourself. And those are the things that you then need to segment into. Okay, this is something that's just part of my genetics and I'm going to live with it for the rest of my life. Or this is something that I can actually improve on. And once you understand what are the areas that you can improve on and you can work on, that's when you can look for tools and tricks and courses to help you improve in those areas. So it really depends on what it is that you need to work on. That will determine where you go to find help. Mentoring is a whole topic on its own. Mentoring is very helpful, but mentoring is only helpful if it's done over a period of time. And if you as the mentee take control of it, prepare for it, go with questions, know what you want to get out of it. Is it someone that actually is strong in your areas of weakness and you want to learn from them? Or is it someone that you aspire to become because you have a lot of things in common and that's why you go to them and you take control of the conversation? That's when you grow and develop from a mentoring relationship. But it is a good thing to do. I'm a big believer in it.
Great, thank you. So I think for the sake of time, I'll ask you one more question, and if you can try to be brief, that'd be great. So how do you suggest, especially as you're talking about mentor relationships, how do you suggest learning or establishing the expectations you need to meet, whether this be from your team, a manager, or even a mentor?
Yeah, those are three different areas. There's no short answer, Brittany, but for your team,
okay.
It's very easy. From a mentor, it's something else. From a mentor, I would just clearly outline what it is that I want to get from the relationship and ask the mentor what it is that they think they can get from you. Some people believe, I know it all, I don't need to learn anything. Other people really seek that mentoring relationship because it's a reverse mutual beneficial relationship. But we can do the deep dive in a later session.
Yeah, we might have to. All right. Well, I think that we'll wrap it up there. Thank you so much, Elzandi, for taking time. I know it's very early for you, so we appreciate you taking time to come talk to us. And I think with that, we'll wrap it up. And thank you both to Elzandi and Julie and everybody who attended. We really appreciate it.
Bye, guys. Have a good night.
Bye. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Thanks, Julie.